She was just an ordinary nurse with a broken past, but when the city's richest man saw the way she touched his mother's hand, his world changed forever, and the ending will leave you speechless. Stay tuned because you're about to watch a beautiful story and find out what happened next. Hello, family. Welcome to Tales Haven. Kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel for more beautiful stories. Thank you as you do so. Sit back, relax as we dive into the story. The evening was quiet inside St. Mary's Hospital, the kind of silence that only came after long hours of rushing footsteps, echoing announcements, and constant beeping machines. Nurse Isabella Hayes walked slowly through the corridor, her white shoes making soft sounds against the tiled floor. She was tired, but she never let her tiredness show. For Isabella, every patient deserved her best smile, her gentlest touch, and her kindest words. At 28 years old, Isabella carried more weight in her heart than most people her age. Years ago, her mother had disappeared without a trace. One morning she was there, and by evening, she was gone. No calls, no letters, no goodbye. It had been the deepest wound of Isabella's life. And though the world had moved on, Isabella's heart never did. Every day, she carried the pain like a shadow, hoping and praying that maybe, just maybe, her mother was alive somewhere. Because of this, Isabella treated every patient as though they were family. She gave them the love she still longed to give her mother. That night, the automatic doors of the emergency room flew open. A loud voice shouted, "We need help here now." Several doctors rushed forward as a stretcher rolled in quickly, wheels squeaking against the floor. On it lay an elderly woman, pale and lifeless, her chest rising only with the help of the oxygen mask strapped to her face. Isabella ran toward them without hesitation. "What happened?" she asked, slipping on gloves and helping adjust the woman's foreline. "She collapsed at home," one paramedic said breathlessly. No response. Possible stroke. When Isabella looked down at the patient's face, her heart froze. Her hands trembled, and her breath caught in her throat. The woman lying unconscious looked so much like her mother. Same soft cheekbones, same thin lips, even the same faint line on the forehead. For a moment, Isabella forgot where she was. Her vision blurred as tears filled her eyes. She bent closer, whispering in a shaky voice, "Mom? Is it you?" Her colleagues glanced at her, confused, but Isabella quickly blinked away the tears and forced herself back into reality. She grabbed the patient's chart. The name written clearly was Margaret Blake, not her mother. Her chest ached, but she swallowed hard and wiped her eyes. It wasn't her. Still, something inside her stirred. She couldn't just treat this as another patient. As the doctors gave instructions, Isabella stood beside the woman and gently brushed back her gray hair. She leaned down and whispered softly, "Don't give up. You're not alone." Hours passed, and the woman was moved into a private ward. Other nurses came and went, but Isabella stayed longer than her shift required. She adjusted the blanket, checked the oxygen, and even held the woman's cold hand in hers. "Please fight," she whispered with tears in her eyes. "I don't know who you are, but I'll be here for you. I promise." At that moment, Isabella did not know that the woman she was pouring her love into was the mother of Ethan Blake, one of the most powerful and richest CEOs in the city. She had no idea that her kindness tonight would change the rest of her life. But destiny had already begun its quiet work. She didn't know why she spoke with such emotion. Maybe because the woman reminded her so much of her missing mother. In her heart, Isabella felt as if God had placed this woman in her path for a reason. What Isabella did not know was that she wasn't alone. Behind the glass wall of the ward, a man stood in silence. Tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a sharp black suit, he looked like someone who commanded the world with a single word. His name was Ethan Blake, the only son of Margaret Blake. To the world, he was the cold and untouchable billionaire CEO whose face often appeared on business magazines and news channels. People described him as powerful, calculating, and unshakable. But in that moment, Ethan wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't a CEO. He wasn't the man people feared and respected. He was simply a son, a broken, worried son watching his mother lie helpless in a coma. And what truly froze him wasn't the sight of his mother. It was the nurse sitting beside her. Ethan had hired the best doctors money could buy. They came in with expensive suits, gave their reports, and left quickly. But this nurse, she wasn't rushing. She wasn't calculating numbers or probabilities. She was praying. She was whispering comfort. She was touching his mother with a tenderness Ethan hadn't seen in years. For a long time, he just stood there, unable to move. His throat felt tight, his chest heavy. He tried to remind himself that this was only her job. But deep down, he knew it was more than duty. This woman cared. Truly cared. Isabella adjusted the blanket again, tucking it gently around Margaret as though she were her own mother. She placed a small flower in a cup on the bedside table, something she had picked from the hospital garden during her short break. "Every woman deserves flowers," she whispered, almost to herself. Ethan's heart skipped. He could feel something unfamiliar rising in him, gratitude mixed with awe. It shook him because he wasn't used to being moved by anyone. Later that night, when Isabella finally left the room to wash her hands, she almost bumped into Ethan in the hallway. She hadn't noticed him before, standing silently in the shadows. She looked up, startled, into his sharp brown eyes. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said quickly, stepping aside. Ethan said nothing at first. His lips parted, but words didn't come easily. For a man who negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking, it was strange that a nurse could make him speechless. Finally, he managed to whisper, You take care of her like she's your own." Isabella blinked, surprised by the softness in his tone. She gave a small, tired smile. "Every mother deserves to be loved," she said quietly. "I lost mine a long time ago. Maybe this is my way of giving back." Ethan froze again. Her words struck him like lightning. He wanted to say something more, but for once in his life, he had no clever response, no powerful speech. He simply nodded, his throat too tight to speak. As Isabella walked away, Ethan stood there, still staring. For years, he had been surrounded by people who wanted his money, his name, his power. But tonight, he had seen something rare. A nurse who didn't even know who he was, giving his mother something that money could never buy. And for the first time in years, Ethan Blake felt small, humbled, and deeply moved. He came back early the next morning, long before his board would expect him. He wore a simple dark sweater instead of a suit. He didn't want to look like a CEO here. He wanted to look like a son. When he reached the door, Isabella Hayes was already inside. She had pulled the curtains open halfway so the room could breathe. She rolled gently plucked flowers between her fingers, tiny white ones from the hospital garden, and set them in a paper cup beside the bed. Then she checked the oxygen level, the 4-line, and the chart. Her movements were careful and unhurried. "Good morning," Ethan said softly from the doorway. Isabella looked up, surprised, then gave a small smile. "Good morning." She checked the watch on her wrist. "You're here early." "I couldn't sleep," he said. He lifted the 2 takeaway cups in his hand. "Coffee?" Her smile reached her eyes. "Thank you. I'll take it after I finish this." He stepped in, stood at the foot of the bed, and stared at his mother's face. "How is she?" "Stable," Isabella replied. "No major changes during the night. Her breathing is steady. Blood pressure is within range." She paused, then added, "I've seen patients in deep places wake up. It takes time, but time is still hope." The word hope sounded simple when she said it. It didn't feel like a speech. It felt like a hand offering something warm. Ethan placed the coffee on the side table and came closer. He noticed the blanket tucked neatly around his mother's shoulders, the fresh comb lines in her soft gray hair, and the tiny flower vase. Every small thing said, "Someone loves you." "Do you really think she can hear us?" he asked. Isabella nodded. "I do. I speak to her as if she can." Some patients respond to love, to familiar voices, to gentle touch. Even if they can't answer, the heart remembers. Ethan swallowed. He was a man who signed contracts with strong words and fast numbers. He did not know how to speak to silence. What should I say? Tell her what you want her to know, Isabella said. Tell her you're here. He looked at his mother's face. For a moment, he felt like a child again, small and unsure. He reached for her hand and held it. It was warm, but still. Hi, Mom, he said quietly. His voice shook. It's me. I'm here. He paused. I'm not going anywhere. Isabella busied herself with the chart to give him privacy, but her eyes softened. She knew that voice, the voice of a child hidden in a grown man. After a while, she guided him through small tasks. Would you like to help me moisturize her hands? It prevents dryness. It also tells her she's cared for. Ethan nodded. She squeezed a small line of lotion into his palm and showed him how to rub it into the skin, slow and gentle, from wrist to fingertip. He copied her. The act felt humble. It felt right. He wasn't powerful here, but he was present. That was enough. They worked in quiet, sharing the soft sound of lotion and breathing. When they were done, Isabella handed him a tissue to wipe his hands. Thank you, he said. You're doing well, she replied. She will feel this. A light knock sounded at the door. Dr. Carter, the attending physician, stepped in with a tablet and kind eyes. Morning, he greeted. Vitals are stable. We'll maintain current meds and monitor neurological response. He glanced at Ethan. I hear you've been spending time here. I will be here every day, Ethan said simply. Dr. Carter smiled. That matters. He gave a few instructions to Isabella, then left to make rounds. When they were alone again, Isabella finally reached for the coffee Ethan brought. She took a sip and closed her eyes for a second. This is good. He allowed himself a small smile. It's the first thing I've done right in a while. She tilted her head. You're doing many things right. You're here. He wanted to ask her about the line she'd said the night before, I lost mine a long time ago. He didn't want to open a wound, but the care in her voice sounded like someone who understood pain. He chose a gentle approach. You said you lost your mother, he murmured. I'm sorry. Isabella's eyes lowered to the bedsheet. Years ago. No trace. The police tried, but life moved on. She touched the edge of the blanket, smoothing an imaginary crease. Sometimes, I see her face in strangers. It hurts, but it also keeps me soft. Ethan heard the quiet strength in her words. She wasn't trying to be brave for applause. She was simply choosing kindness instead of bitterness. He had spent his life building walls. She had spent hers opening doors. If you ever want help, he said carefully, I know people who can look again. Properly. Not to invade your privacy, just if you want. Isabella looked up and their eyes met. Gratitude flickered there, along with caution. Thank you, she said. Maybe someday. For now, this is where I am meant to be. He respected that. He nodded and took the chair on the other side of the bed. From then on, a quiet routine formed, simple, steady, gentle. In the mornings, Isabella turned on soft instrumental music at low volume. She changed the sheets with careful hands, speaking to Margaret as she moved, explaining every step. We're turning you to your left. Your pillow is right here. You're safe. In the afternoons, she read short passages from a small book she kept in her pocket, prayers and warm words about comfort and courage. In the evenings, she hummed, a low, soothing melody that made the room feel like a home instead of a ward. Ethan learned to participate. He wiped his mother's forehead with a warm cloth. He tidied the bedside table. He spoke, at first in short sentences, then in fuller ones, memories of a vacation by the sea, the way Margaret used to burn toast every Sunday morning, the time she hugged him so hard after his first big failure that he couldn't breathe, and he didn't want to. While he talked, Isabella listened, and the silence in the room grew soft instead of heavy. Not everyone understood. In the break room, a few nurses whispered when they saw Ethan sitting hours on end with the quiet nurse who kept flowers in a cup. Who is that man? One asked. Looks important, another said. Maybe a lawyer. Maybe she knows him. Isabella ignored the talk. She had learned that love requires focus. She showed up, did the small things well, and left the rest to time. On the third evening, a small moment came, so small it could have been missed. Ethan was telling his mother about a silly school play he had ruined as a boy when Isabella, standing near the monitor, saw it. Margaret's index finger twitched. Not once, but twice. "Mr. Blake," Isabella said, voice calm but bright. "Look." He leaned forward, heart racing. "Mom? Can you hear me?" He watched, breath held. The finger moved again, just a tiny movement, like a whisper in the body. Isabella pressed the call button. "Dr. Carter, to Ward 5, please." The doctor came quickly. He checked reflexes, pupil response, and the readings. "It might be a reflex," he said, careful and honest. "But it's a good sign. We keep going." Reflex or not, hope filled the room like warm air. Ethan exhaled a shaky breath and turned to Isabella. "You saw it," he said, almost laughing in disbelief. "I did," she replied, smiling. "We keep speaking. We keep loving. The brain listens." Over the next days, Ethan rearranged his schedule. Meetings moved online or to early mornings. His assistant protested once, but he silenced it with a simple line. "My mother comes first." One afternoon, Olivia Moore, a senior family advisor who had known the Blakes for years, arrived in a crisp navy suit. She stood at the end of the bed, tapping her tablet. "Ethan," she said, "there's a private facility uptown that might offer." "No," he said gently but firmly. He glanced at Isabella, who met his eyes and stayed silent. "We're not moving her. She is stable here. She is cared for here." Olivia followed his gaze to the nurse, then to the flowers in the paper cup. Her expression softened for a heartbeat. "Very well," she said. "I'll inform the board." After Olivia left, Ethan turned to Isabella. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For making me brave enough to say no." Isabella shook her head. "It was your decision." "Maybe," he said. "But your care gave me the courage." That evening, Isabella showed Ethan a new routine. "Let's do hand over hand," she suggested. She placed his hand over his mother's, then guided his voice. "Tell her you forgive her for anything she couldn't fix. Tell her you're proud of her. Tell her she can rest while you stand watch." He tried. The words came out uneven at first, then stronger. "I forgive you for not always being there," he whispered. "I know you tried. I'm proud of you for everything you did alone after Dad died. You can rest. I'm here now." A single tear slipped from the corner of Margaret's eye. Ethan choked on breath and looked at Isabella, startled. "It happens," she said softly. "Sometimes the body answers before the voice returns." He pressed a tissue to his mother's cheek as if the tear were a treasure. Night fell. The hospital grew quiet again. Isabella dimmed the lights and set the monitors to a softer glow. She washed her hands, wrote her notes neatly, and checked the 4 one last time. At the door, Ethan stopped her. "You changed this room," he said. "You changed me." She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw her smile fully, tired and real and bright. "Love changes rooms," she said. "We just have to let it in." He nodded, unable to say more. As Isabella walked down the hall, the beeping settled into a gentle rhythm behind her. Inside the ward, a son held his mother's hand and spoke to her in a voice he hadn't used in years. Outside, a nurse carried a quiet ache for a missing mother and yet found the strength to heal another family. Neither of them knew how the world outside would soon find out who Ethan really was. Neither of them knew how pressure and fear would crash into this fragile piece. For now, there was only a small flower in a paper cup, a steady monitor, and a bond that needed no words. They would need all of it for what was coming next. The quiet rhythm inside Margaret's ward didn't last for long. Outside the hospital walls, people were beginning to notice the unusual routine of the city's most powerful billionaire CEO. Ethan Blake, the man who was normally surrounded by board members and lawyers, was now spending long hours at a hospital. Rumors spread quickly. Some thought he was preparing to buy the hospital. Others whispered he had fallen seriously ill. Inside the ward, however, none of those things mattered. What mattered was the fragile woman lying in bed and the quiet bond forming between her son and the nurse by her side. But as days turned into weeks, whispers also started among the hospital staff. Nurses passing by the private room often peeked in and saw Isabella sitting close to Margaret, holding her hand, reading aloud softly. And always right there beside her was Ethan, listening, watching, sometimes helping. "Do you see how he looks at her?" one nurse whispered to another in the break room. "She doesn't even realize who he is," another answered. "Or maybe she does, and she's acting humble." "Lucky girl," someone else added with a touch of envy. Isabella heard the whispers once, as she entered to collect supplies. Her chest tightened, but she chose not to react. She had promised herself that gossip would never distract her from giving her best. Patience came first. Always. That night, Margaret's condition suddenly worsened. The machines began to beep frantically, alarms breaking the calm of the room. Isabella rushed forward, her training taking over. "Check the oxygen line," she called out as another nurse hurried in. Ethan, standing by the bed, felt his heart drop to his stomach. "What's happening?" he demanded, panic in his usually steady voice. "She's fighting," Isabella said quickly, attaching a fresh oxygen mask and adjusting the flow. "Her body is weak, but she's fighting." Doctors came running, giving orders, adjusting medications, checking her heart rhythm. Ethan stood frozen, powerless. His hands shook as he gripped the edge of the bed, watching the mother he loved more than life slip further from his reach. He had faced business empires collapsing, billion-dollar negotiations, and rivals trying to destroy him. But nothing made him feel as helpless as seeing his mother's chest rise and fall under the pressure of machines. Through the chaos, he saw Isabella. Her hair had fallen loose from its bun, sweat glistened on her forehead, but her eyes were steady. She kept talking to Margaret in a calm, firm voice. "Stay with us, Mrs. Blake. You are stronger than this. Your son needs you. Don't leave him yet." Her words were not medical instructions. They were prayers, soft but powerful. Ethan had never seen anything like it. She wasn't only fighting with her hands, she was fighting with her heart. After what felt like forever, the beeping slowed, then steadied. The numbers on the monitors leveled out. Margaret's body relaxed, her breathing returning to a regular rhythm. The room exhaled with relief. "It's okay," Isabella whispered, brushing a tear from her cheek. "You're safe now." Ethan pressed both hands to his face, then lowered them, his eyes glistening with tears. He had not cried in years. He turned to Isabella, his voice raw. "I've stood in front of thousands of people and never broken. But tonight, I thought I lost her." Isabella touched his arm gently. "Sometimes strength is not about control. Sometimes it's about love. That's what she needs most." Her words struck him deeply, cutting through the armor he had built for years. He realized he had spent his life trying to prove power, but in this room, none of that mattered. What mattered was love, and the nurse standing before him reminded him of that truth with every breath she took. From that night, something shifted. Ethan no longer stood in the background. He joined Isabella in every little routine. If she read stories aloud, he sat beside her and added memories of his own. If she sang softly, he listened, sometimes even humming along. When Isabella prayed, Ethan bowed his head, silently agreeing with every word. The billionaire CEO who once believed money could solve everything was slowly learning that sometimes the greatest medicine was compassion. And as he looked at Isabella, her tired eyes filled with light, her gentle hands caring for his mother, Ethan realized something he couldn't ignore any longer. He wasn't just grateful to her. He was beginning to fall in love with her. The days that followed the crisis were filled with both fear and hope. Margaret's condition remained stable, but every time Ethan walked into the room, he carried a quiet weight in his chest. He could not shake the memory of those machines screaming, of almost losing her. But what gave him strength was Isabella. She was always there, steady, gentle, patient. She prayed aloud as she adjusted Margaret's pillows. She whispered encouragement when she changed the forebag. She held Margaret's hand as though it were the most precious thing in the world. Ethan found himself watching her more than he watched the monitors. Each movement she made told a story. The way she tucked the blanket carefully showed kindness. The way she spoke to his mother, as though she could hear, showed faith. And the way she kept going even when she looked exhausted showed strength. One evening, after the doctors had finished their rounds, the ward grew quiet again. Isabella sat by Margaret's bedside, reading from her small prayer book. Ethan sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees, his eyes never leaving his mother's face. Suddenly, Isabella paused. Her voice trembled. "Mr. Blake, look." Ethan's heart jumped. He followed her gaze. Margaret's fingers, weak and slow, curled ever so slightly around Isabella's hand. His breath caught.
Mom?
"Mom, it's me. Can you hear me?" His voice broke with hope and fear. Margaret's eyelids fluttered. At first, it seemed like nothing. But then, with immense effort, her eyes opened, just a little. The room seemed to stop breathing. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "Mrs. Blake, you're safe. You're not alone." Ethan's own tears spilled freely as he leaned closer. "Mom, I'm here. I never left." Margaret's lips trembled as she tried to form words. At last, a weak whisper escaped. "Ethan?" The sound of his name from her lips shattered him. He pressed his forehead against her hand, sobbing softly. "Yes, Mom. It's me. I'm right here. Don't you leave me again." Doctors rushed in after the alarms picked up the change, but for once Ethan didn't feel fear. He felt life returning. The medical team checked her vitals, confirmed responsiveness, and smiled. "This is progress," Dr. Carter said. "She's coming back." The miracle spread through the hospital like a quiet wave. Nurses smiled as they passed. Staff whispered about how the billionaire's mother had finally opened her eyes. But in the ward, it was not wealth or medicine that felt like the greatest cure. It was love. Later, when the doctors left, Margaret's eyes shifted slowly from her son to the young nurse at her side. She lifted her hand slightly, as if to reach out. Isabella leaned closer, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Thank you," Margaret whispered, her voice faint but clear enough. "For being here." Isabella shook her head, her voice soft and breaking. "You don't need to thank me. You are like a mother to me too." Ethan could no longer hold back his heart. He turned to Isabella, his voice trembling but sure. "You didn't just save her life, you saved mine too. For years, I lived only for power, for success. But you," his voice cracked, "you reminded me what really matters." Isabella's lips parted, shocked by his honesty. She could see it in his eyes. This was not the cold CEO the world spoke about. This was a son, a man, whose heart had been broken and healed in the same room. At that moment, Ethan knew the truth. He wasn't just grateful. He was in love. And it was the kind of love that couldn't be bought, couldn't be planned. The kind that arrived like a miracle, just like his mother waking up. The nurses outside, peeking through the glass, could only whisper in disbelief. "What just happened in there? Did you see how he looked at her? This is unbelievable." What happened next would soon leave not just the hospital, but the entire city speechless. Margaret's recovery was slow, but each day brought small victories. First, she could open her eyes longer. Then, she managed to hold Ethan's hand firmly. Days later, she whispered full sentences, asking about the world she had missed. And through it all, Isabella was there, brushing her hair, reading aloud, helping her sit up, feeding her spoonful by spoonful. Ethan never left either. He canceled board meetings, rescheduled trips, and surprised his assistants by saying only 3 words: "Family comes first." One sunny afternoon, Margaret asked both of them to sit near her bed. Her voice was still weak, but her eyes were strong. She held Ethan's hand in one and Isabella's hand in the other. "Ethan," she whispered, "you built empires, but you were empty inside. This nurse gave me love when I couldn't fight for myself. Don't let her slip away." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "Mrs. Blake, please. I only did what my heart told me." Margaret smiled faintly. "And that is why you are different. The world is full of people who do things for gain. You gave with nothing in return. Ethan's heart pounded as he looked at Isabella. For so long, he had been afraid of showing weakness, afraid of being loved for the wrong reasons. But here, in front of his mother and the woman who had saved her, he finally understood. He took a deep breath, his voice steady but emotional. Isabella Hayes, I thought I had everything, but I was wrong. The truth is, I had nothing until I met you. You gave my mother back her life. You gave me back my heart. Please, let me spend the rest of my life showing you that love, not money, is what really matters. Will you marry me? The words hung in the air like a miracle. Isabella's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. She could barely speak through her emotions. Ethan, she paused, trembling with both shock and joy.
Yes.
Yes, I will. Margaret squeezed both their hands, tears of happiness rolling down her cheeks. Now my heart is at peace. Months later, under the warm glow of spring, the hospital garden was transformed into a wedding venue. White roses lined the walkway, soft music played in the background, and guests from every corner of the city came to witness what many had thought impossible, the cold billionaire CEO marrying a humble nurse. Margaret walked slowly down the aisle, supported gently by Ethan. She had insisted on attending her son's wedding, and when she took her seat, her smile was brighter than any diamond. Then came Isabella, dressed in a flowing white gown that made her look like an angel. She held a small bouquet of fresh lilies, simple yet elegant. Every step she took down the aisle was filled with tears, joy, and disbelief that this was truly her life now. When Ethan saw her, he froze, just like he had the first time he watched her through the hospital glass. Only this time, it wasn't awe of her kindness alone. It was awe of the fact that she was about to be his wife. I do, Ethan said, his voice deep and certain. I do, Isabella whispered, her voice trembling with happiness. The guests clapped, some even wiping their eyes. The billionaire CEO, who once seemed untouchable, kissed his bride with a tenderness that proved he was a changed man. After the ceremony, Margaret embraced Isabella tightly. Welcome to the family, my daughter, she whispered. Isabella cried into her shoulder, realizing that though she had lost her own mother, God had given her another through love. As the night went on, laughter filled the garden. Music played, children danced, and even the wealthiest of guests admitted quietly that they had never seen Ethan Blake smile so much. For Isabella, it wasn't the expensive decorations or the high-profile guests that mattered. It was the way Ethan held her hand, as if she was his whole world. It was the way Margaret watched them with proud, teary eyes. It was the way she finally felt she belonged, loved, seen, cherished. In the weeks that followed, Ethan used his wealth not for himself, but for others. He funded a foundation in Isabella's honor, one that provided free healthcare for patients who couldn't afford it. On the front of the hospital wing, a plaque read, "Love heals more than medicine." And every time Ethan looked at Isabella, whether she was helping a patient, laughing with his mother, or simply sitting beside him, he knew one thing for certain. The greatest deal he had ever made was the day he chose love. That brings us to the end of this video. I hope you find this story worth watching. If you do, kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel for more beautiful stories. Like and share this video to your friends and loved ones. Your support and engagement encourage me to post more videos. Thanks for watching.